Today we're going to be tying a caddis emerger fly, and this is a really great pattern actually. It's called the Sparkle Pupa, the Sparkle Caddis Pupa, and we're going to tie this today just on a size 14 extra long nymph hook. And we're going to use this black nano silk thread. So I'm going to start out by using some of this trigger point, which is a fiber that we'll use both for the shuck coming out of the back, and we'll also use it for the little bubbly case that will surround the thorax or the abdomen of this fly. And the purpose of the glimmer, I guess, on this is to kind of mimic an air bubble around the fly as it is moving up to the surface and emerging up at the top. So I've got just a little bit of that trigger point here, and I'm just going to go ahead and attach that to the top of my hook. And we're going to go ahead and tie back on it a little bit. This is one where we do want to make sure that we have some room at the end, because there are quite a few moving parts there when we get to the end of the fly. So we'll just come on in now that I've got that tied in, and we'll cut that off just about like that. That way I can kind of tie it down a little bit further up towards the eye of the hook. Just take some careful wraps here. And that will just help kind of lock all that down. So once we have that in place like that, we've got our shuck in place. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off, and I'm going to cut that off about the width of the gap of the hook. So that's the shuck, which is basically the part of the case that was around it when it was a pupa, and it's starting to emerge as an adult caddis fly, and the little shell of the fly will sometimes be coming out the back, and so that's what we've got there. So next we're going to tie in the material that's going to be making kind of that bubble, and we're going to use the exact same material that we just used. And what I like to do is get a fairly long chunk of this and cut it in half. That way I make sure that I've got the exact same amount, or at least a similar amount on either side of the hook. So we're going to be tying this in on either side. So we're going to tie one bunch here on the side of the hook facing me a little bit closer, and I'm going to just go ahead and take a few wraps to secure that in place. And then I'm going to just go ahead and draw that back to kind of decrease the amount of bulk that I end up with at the top of the fly. So by taking a few thread wraps back towards the bend of the hook and then drawing the material back, we'll have less buildup going on here on the fly, especially as we get up near the front of the fly. And we're going to take that second bunch, because we cut that in half, and we're going to tie this in on the lens side of the hook. And you'll note how much extra I have sticking out there. And I know I've shown this in other videos. But this is just, sometimes I used to fight this a lot, and then I kind of watched other tyers and realized you don't really have to fight it as much as I thought you needed to. So I'm just going to secure that in place like this, and then I'm going to just go ahead and draw that similar to the other side back until I have it about just like that. So now I've got kind of a bunch on either side of the hook here. Then I'm going to go back down the back of the hook towards the bend and secure those in place. And I'll try as hard as I can to kind of keep these one bunch on either side of the hook, because we're going to be pulling this stuff forward kind of and create that little bubble look that will make this the Sparkle Caddis. So once we've got that trigger point material in place on either side of the hook, the next thing I like to do, I do like to rib this a little bit, and so I'm going to use a little piece of gold tinsel here because it'll allow me to rib this without actually adding as much weight as it would be if I used a piece of gold wire here. So similar to the trigger point, I'm just going to secure that in place, and then I'm going to draw it back as well. And then secure it back down towards the very end of the hook, towards the bend here where we'll start the abdomen of the fly. So we'll get started now dubbing here. This is going to be some hare's ear dubbing, and it's in a dark olive. And I just got that kind of prepared, and I'm just going to finger dub this right onto the thread here, and then kind of work my way back towards the bend of the hook where I want that abdomen to begin, right about there. And then I'm going to tighten this up with my fingers, trying to keep them out of the way of the camera much as I can. So you'll see me do this quite a bit, where I just kind of reach in after a few twists of passes around the fly here, just to tighten it down a little bit. And I don't want to come up too far on this, so this is probably about as far as I'm going to want to go with this material. So I'll just go ahead and pull the balance of that off. I'm going to pull everything a little bit backwards as I kind of tighten this down a little bit. So with our dubbing done, I'm now going to grab hold of my gold tinsel, oval tinsel here, and we're just going to take some evenly spaced wraps just to form kind of the hint of a ribbing on this fly. It's going to be surrounded by the other material to make the kind of the bubble, so you're not going to see this too much, but I do like to have just a hint of a rib on this fly. So I'm going to bring that all the way up here to the end of the abdomen, and we'll just go ahead and tie that material off. And just note that I am leaving some extra space here, because we're going to tie a wing on this, and then we're going to I'm going to put a soft hackle on it. So once I've got that about there, I'm going to grab my scissors while everything falls on the ground. We'll just go ahead and snip that off. So from here, I'm going to start kind of just working on either side, drawing this material, our trigger point, towards the eye of the hook, and that's why we tied a little bit of this material on either side, so that we end up with more of that bubble on either side and surrounding the hook a little bit. I like to try to get it in there kind of like so. It looks kind of messy here, but that's okay. That's what it's kind of supposed to do. And I'll let that kind of push back and keep this kind of bubble in place. And I'll just go ahead and pinch that right there while I bring my thread in. And we'll secure that, not tightly, but we'll secure it down just so we can make some adjustments and keep that from moving too far on us. So we're going to end up with something like this here. And that's a little bit too bubbly, which is, I'll just go ahead and pull forward just a little bit on this material here towards the eye of the hook, just to decrease the size of that bubble just a little bit. So I'm good with that there. I'm going to go ahead and take some wraps now back to secure that bubble in place a little more tightly. So once I have that kind of cleaned up a little bit, I'm pretty much done with that portion of the fly. You can see we still have the shuck coming out the back and the nice little bubble and just the hint of the abdomen with a ribbing on the inside. And this will be, like I said before, an emerger pattern. So this is, you know, the stage of life when this caddis pupa is coming up to the surface of the water and sitting there on the surface. It will sit right in the surface film, just ready to break free of its case. The wings will come out, dry off, and it'll be able to fly off. And that's why it's called the emerger, is because it's coming from the bottom and it's emerging up near the surface of the water. So you'll see a lot of emerger patterns that will fish along the surface. So from here we're going to tie in a deer hair wing on this. So I've cut off my little clump here of deer hair, and you can see the ends are not lined up. We're going to line them up. That's what we'll do with the hair stacker. And you'll also note, hopefully, a lot of under fur in the deer hair, and we want to clean that out before we stack it. And we'll just go ahead and grab a comb, and I just use one of these combs or whatever I have handy, and I'm just going to run my deer hair through there a few times. Both the butt ends and the top ends, mostly the top ends, because that's really what we're going to end up tying. We're going to be cutting the butt ends off before we tie it in. So we just want to clean that out a little bit before we put it into our hair stacker. So once I have that stacked, it's going to look hopefully something like this. And you'll see the banding and the deer hair there when I'm not using bleached, and you have the different colors in the natural deer hair. You can see that banding a little bit better. And I want to keep this alignment, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to pinch those tips pretty tight with my fingers and remove that bunch from my hair stacker. And then I'm going to switch hands, keeping this pinched really tight, because I want to take a measurement now. I want this wing to just extend about the length of the body and not much more than that. And so this is gauging where I need to make the cut on the deer hair, which is going to be right, kind of right there, right where my fingers are. So I'm going to move away from the camera for a moment and clip the ends of those off. So once you have those butt ends clipped off, you should have a nice clean edge here. I'm going to go ahead and throw my thread or start spinning it counterclockwise, which will allow this material, my thread, to jump back towards my fingers, which is what I want it to do. So you'll note how that thread at this point now wants to jump towards the bend of the hook, which is what I want it to do, because now it's going to jump back into my fingers instead of over the eye of the hook. And I'm going to take one wrap down, pull it a little bit tight, but then I'm going to take a second wrap. I'm going to pull it much tighter. And then I'll just go ahead and take a couple more wraps to make sure it's secured and in place and where I want it. And that's looking fine to me. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to kind of, usually on like a deer or elk hair caddis, I would just leave that little that little head in place, but we're going to tie in a soft hackle here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up a little bit and prepare it for tying in our final material, which is going to be a soft hackle. So we're going to tie in our soft hackle now and finish this fly off. For the soft hackle, I'm going to use black here, and I'm just using a whiting hand cape. When I tie these, I'm gonna put the tip of the hackle, not the part that connects to the skin itself, but the tip of the hackle into hackle pliers like this. Now I'm gonna wet my fingers and I'm gonna just stroke those fibers backwards. So after I get done stroking those backwards pretty well, it should be looking something like that. And then I can release that out of my pliers. And once I release it from a plier, I'm going to have something that looks kind of like this. And that's going to be my tie-in point. So I'm going to turn the operation around just a hair. And then we're going to come down and we're going to secure that hackle into place. So I'll just take a couple of thread wraps right there, Then I'll take a few more just to secure this better down, and then what I'm going to do before I get all the way up to the eye of the hook here is I'm going to cut that tip off. I'm going to grab my hackle pliers again. We're going to go ahead and grab now the back end, close to the end of the hackle that attaches to the skin here, into my hackle pliers. And I'm going to hold that straight up, perpendicular. I'm going to do a lot of wetting of my fingers here because we want to stroke these fibers backwards, and we'll go ahead and do that. We'll make sure we get 1 or 2 good wraps right up against that deer hair wing. After we've got that, I'll try to talk while I continue to wet my fingers, because I want to continually stroke the material back, not only what I'm putting, what's on the shaft of this, but also the fibers that are already in place. I'll keep stroking all of that back. One more turn probably. That should do us just fine. So I'm going to keep the tension on my hackle there while I get my thread off of the bobbin cradle. Reel that in just a little bit with my hand, because the last step here is we just need to secure that. And I don't want to trap too many fibers, and so what I'll do is kind of wiggle my thread while I pull somewhat towards the eye of the hook, the hackle itself, and that just creates some separation from the fibers that are still on the shaft and the fibers that are on the hook itself, creating that soft hackle. So I've got those, a couple of wraps in place. I'll take a couple of wraps kind of in front as well. And from here, I'm just going to release my hackle plier. That's secure now. And I'm going to come in with my scissors, and we're going to go ahead and clip that as close as we possibly can, the shaft of this hackle right up against the shaft of the hook. So just like that, and we're going to finish this off just by pulling any errant fibers that we have backwards as we work on just putting together a head, and we're going to tie backwards a little bit, and that will also help keep that soft hackle moving or pointing backwards, which is what we're looking for it to do. So now we're at this point, I'm just going to grab my whip finisher, and we're going to throw on a 4 or 5 turn whip finish, trying to keep those turns more towards the soft hackle than towards the eye. That will help us build up a head that's not thick at the eye, but thicker up towards where that soft hackle is. I'm going to draw that thread backwards, pull it tight. So now that we've got that clipped off, that finishes up our fly. This is the Caddis Sparkle Pupa. We've got our shut coming out the back, and our deer hair wing, and our bubble of air. One variation that I've seen quite a bit on this fly pattern is this piece up front, the hackle. I've seen people use dubbing, which is perfectly fine, a dark dubbing, or I've seen folks use like an ostrich herl, which also gives you that nice fluffy area behind that deer hair wing. I like using the hen cape. Just makes for me a more elegant looking soft hackle on this particular pattern. But that's it. So give it a shot. It's a good looking fly, and it fishes.